There comes a point in life when you get tired of waiting for people to change, waiting for an apology that never comes, waiting for time to magically erase the pain. And then it hits you. Healing doesn't come from anyone else. Healing doesn't begin when the world finally sees your worth. Healing begins the moment you decide to stop abandoning yourself and start choosing you. Acknowledging your pain is one of the hardest yet most important steps in healing. Most people spend years running from their wounds, pretending they don't exist, or numbing themselves so they don't have to feel. It's human nature to want to escape discomfort, but pain doesn't go away just because you ignore it. In fact, the more you suppress it, the louder it becomes. Healing cannot begin in denial. It begins the moment you look yourself in the mirror and say, yes, I am hurting. Yes, I have been carrying this. And yes, it's time I stop pretending it doesn't exist. So many of us have been taught that acknowledging pain makes us weak, that crying is a sign of failure, or that admitting our struggles means we're broken. But the opposite is true. When you finally have the courage to face what hurts, you are showing a strength that denial will never give you. Think about it. How can you fix something you refuse to acknowledge? If there's a wound on your body, ignoring it won't heal it. You clean it, treat it, and protect it. Emotional wounds are no different. They demand your attention. The first step in choosing yourself is being honest about what you've gone through. You cannot heal what you won't name. That might mean admitting you stayed in a relationship longer than you should have because you didn't believe you deserved better. It might mean admitting you've been overworking yourself because you're afraid of feeling unworthy if you slow down. It might mean admitting that your childhood left scars you still carry. None of these admissions make you weak. They make you brave. You are stepping into truth, and truth is the foundation of freedom. Acknowledgement doesn't mean wallowing. It doesn't mean staying stuck in the story of your pain forever. It means giving yourself permission to finally feel what you've avoided. Feelings demand to be felt, and when you bury them, they don't disappear. They simply show up in other ways. They surface as anger at the wrong people, as exhaustion that no amount of sleep can fix, as anxiety that never seems to go away. But when you sit with them, when you say, this hurt me, and it's okay to admit that, you allow your mind and body to finally release what has been trapped inside for so long. Some people avoid acknowledgement because they fear the floodgates will open and they won't know how to handle it. They think, if I start crying, I'll never stop. But the truth is, emotions are waves. They rise, they peak, and then they fall. They don't last forever. What lasts forever is the damage of never letting them out. Think of acknowledgement as turning on a light in a dark room. At first, it's uncomfortable because your eyes aren't used to the brightness. But as your vision adjusts, you realize the shadows that scared you weren't as big as they seemed. The same thing happens with emotional pain. The moment you face it, it begins to lose the power it had over you. Choosing yourself begins here, because when you ignore your pain, you are abandoning yourself. You're telling yourself that your feelings don't matter. But when you acknowledge them, you're sending a message deep inside. I hear you, I see you, and I will take care of you. That is the first act of self-love. That is where healing begins. This process may not be easy. It may mean revisiting moments you'd rather forget, sitting with memories that sting, or admitting truths that feel heavy. But remember, pain acknowledged is pain that can be released. Pain ignored is pain that controls you. You deserve to be free. You deserve to no longer carry what's been weighing you down. And freedom starts with recognition. So let yourself admit it. Admit you're tired. Admit you're hurt. Admit you've been betrayed, overlooked, abandoned, or misunderstood. Let the words come out of your mouth even if no one else hears them. Because the moment you acknowledge your pain, you've already taken a step forward. You've already shifted from being a prisoner of your past to the author of your healing. That single step, saying, "This happened and it affected me," is where the journey begins. The truth is, healing is not about erasing the past. It's about facing it, learning from it, and deciding it no longer defines your future. But that can only happen once you stop running and start acknowledging. You can't change what you won't face. You can't heal what you won't feel. And you can't choose yourself if you're still pretending you don't need healing. Every scar tells a story. Some are stories of survival, some of resilience, some of lessons learned the hard way. But scars are proof you made it through. When you acknowledge your wounds, you're not opening them to bleed again. You're cleaning them so they can finally close. That's the beauty of acknowledgement. It transforms pain from something that controls you into something that strengthens you. And so if you're wondering where to begin, begin here. Begin with honesty. Begin with courage. Begin with a simple act of saying, "I am not okay, but I will be." That single moment of truth is the start of healing, because healing doesn't start with someone else fixing you. Healing begins the moment you choose yourself, and choosing yourself always begins with acknowledging your pain. Most people don't even realize how deeply they've fallen into the pattern of neglecting themselves. It happens quietly over years, as you're taught, sometimes directly, sometimes indirectly, that your worth is tied to how useful you are to others. You learn to show up for family even when you're running on empty. You learn to be the reliable friend who always says yes, even when your own life is crumbling. You learn to put your needs on hold, convincing yourself you'll take care of you later, but later never comes. The truth is, one of the biggest obstacles to healing is this pattern of constantly choosing others over yourself until you become invisible in your own life. Neglect doesn't always look dramatic. It's not always about ignoring yourself completely. Sometimes it's subtle. The skipped meal because you were too busy helping someone else. The lack of sleep because you stayed up listening to someone else's problems. The way you hold back your feelings because you don't want to be a burden. It's death by 1,000 small cuts. And over time, those cuts create a wound so deep that you stop recognizing your own reflection. You start believing your purpose is only to serve others, while your own well-being doesn't matter. That is the lie that keeps you stuck. The tragedy is many people confuse self-neglect with kindness. They think, if I sacrifice myself for others, that makes me a good person. But here's the problem. When you consistently put everyone else first, you're teaching them that you come last. And worse, you're teaching yourself the same thing. You begin to internalize the message that your needs, your desires, and even your healing are less important than everyone else's. That mindset doesn't just drain you, it breaks you. Because you cannot pour from an empty cup, and yet you keep trying, wondering why you feel so lost, tired, and resentful. Breaking this pattern starts with a difficult but necessary realization. You cannot heal until you stop betraying yourself. Healing requires honesty. It requires looking at the ways you've been abandoning yourself under the disguise of love, loyalty, or responsibility. And it requires courage to change. Saying no doesn't mean you love people less. Setting boundaries doesn't mean you've become selfish. Putting yourself first doesn't mean you've stopped caring. It means you've finally recognized that your well-being is the foundation of every relationship you have. If you are constantly depleted, you have nothing real to give anyway. When you neglect yourself, you end up living in survival mode. Your body starts breaking down from stress. Your mind becomes clouded by exhaustion. Your emotions get pushed so far down that they eventually erupt in unhealthy ways. You can't ignore yourself forever. Your body and your spirit will demand attention, whether through burnout, illness, or a complete emotional breakdown. The cost of self-neglect is always higher than the cost of choosing yourself, The choice may feel uncomfortable at first, but it is the only path toward genuine healing. Choosing yourself after years of neglect is not easy because the guilt shows up immediately. The first time you say no, you'll feel like you're letting people down. The first time you rest instead of rushing to fix someone else's problem, you'll feel selfish. That's normal. That discomfort is just evidence that you're breaking a lifelong pattern. And like all patterns, it takes repetition to replace it with something healthier. But every time you choose yourself, you're rewiring your mind to understand that you matter too. Think of it like this. If you had a child who was hungry, tired, and hurting, would you ignore them so you could keep everyone else comfortable? Of course not. You'd nurture that child, protect them, and make sure their needs were met. Yet so many of us fail to give ourselves the same compassion. We treat everyone else's pain as urgent and our own as optional. That has to change because your inner healing will never begin if you keep abandoning the one person who needs you most, you. Breaking the cycle of self-neglect requires small but consistent acts of self-prioritization. It could be as simple as carving out time for rest without apology, speaking your truth, even if it disappoints someone, or allowing yourself to feel emotions instead of suppressing them. These small acts send a powerful message to your subconscious. I matter. And the more often you repeat them, the stronger that belief becomes. Over time, the guilt fades, and in its place grows a new kind of strength, the strength of someone who no longer tolerates their own neglect. But healing does not mean you stop caring about others. It means you stop caring about others at the expense of yourself. It means you finally recognize that your well-being is not negotiable. When you begin to put yourself back at the center of your life, you discover that you actually have more to give, not less. You give from a place of wholeness instead of depletion. You show up with real presence instead of resentment. You become healthier, stronger, and more grounded. And that, in turn, benefits everyone around you. The moment you break the pattern of neglect is the moment you reclaim your power. That choice is not easy, but it is necessary because healing doesn't happen by accident. It doesn't come just by waiting or hoping things will get better. Healing begins when you stop disappearing into the background of your own life and step forward as the priority you've always deserved to be. The power of self-choice is one of the most important and transformative decisions you will ever make in your life. For many of us, we spend years, sometimes decades, giving away our energy, our time, and our hearts to everyone else while leaving ourselves last. We call it sacrifice, we call it love, we call it responsibility, but underneath it all, what often happens is self-abandonment. And the truth is, no matter how much you give to others, if you are not choosing yourself, if you are not honoring your own needs, then you will always feel depleted, resentful, and stuck. Healing begins when you make the conscious choice to prioritize yourself. Not because you don't care about others, but because you finally recognize that your well-being is the foundation on which everything else in your life rests. Choosing yourself is not selfish. That word selfish has been thrown at people so many times as a weapon to make them feel guilty for putting their own needs first. But think about it. How can you pour into someone else when your cup is empty? How can you show up fully for your family, your work, your relationships, if deep down you are constantly betraying yourself? Self-choice is about recognizing that you are not here just to exist for the comfort of others. You are here with your own dreams, your own purpose, your own path. And if you keep ignoring that calling, life will continue to feel heavy and unfulfilling. The moment you decide to choose yourself, you draw a line in the sand. You declare to yourself and to the world that your worth is not negotiable, that you will no longer tolerate situations, relationships, or environments that continuously drain you, that you will no longer silence your voice to keep others comfortable. You begin to step into a mindset where you stop asking for permission to be who you are, and instead you give yourself permission to stand tall in your truth. That choice is where healing begins, because every act of self-choice is an act of self-healing. When you choose yourself, you reclaim your power that may have been buried under years of people-pleasing, fear of rejection, or the need for validation. Power that you may have handed over to others who dictated how you should live, what you should believe, or how much you are worth. Taking that power back doesn't mean you don't love others. It means you finally understand that loving yourself is just as important, if not more. It means you realize that the love you give away so freely should not exclude you. Of course, choosing yourself doesn't always come easy. Sometimes it means walking away from relationships that no longer honor you. Sometimes it means saying no when everything inside you wants to say yes just to avoid conflict. Sometimes it means sitting alone with your pain instead of distracting yourself with people who don't truly care. These moments are difficult, but they are also defining. Every time you choose yourself in those situations, you are sending a powerful message to your mind and your heart. You are worthy of respect, love, and healing. And here's the most beautiful part. When you choose yourself, you give others permission to do the same. Your courage becomes contagious. People around you will see your strength and realize they too can set boundaries. They too can walk away from toxic situations. They too can stop waiting for external validation and start validating themselves. Choosing yourself is not only healing for you, it ripples outward into your world. Think about the alternative. Imagine living a life where you constantly deny yourself, where you never pursue the things that light you up, where you stay stuck in cycles of pain because you are too afraid of what others will think if you break free. That life leads to bitterness, exhaustion, and regret. But when you choose yourself, you trade bitterness for peace, exhaustion for energy, regret for purpose. Doesn't mean life becomes easy, but it does mean life becomes meaningful. Choosing yourself is the ultimate act of freedom. It is the choice to no longer be defined by your wounds, but instead to be defined by your willingness to rise above them. It is the choice to no longer wait for someone to rescue you, but to rescue yourself. It is the choice to stop living as a shadow in your own story and step fully into the role of the main character. So when you find yourself at that crossroads, wondering how healing begins, remember this. It doesn't begin with time or apologies or even closure from others. It begins with one brave decision. The decision to choose yourself. And once you make that choice, everything in your life begins to shift. The wounds don't magically disappear, but they stop controlling you. The pain doesn't define you anymore because your choice to honor yourself becomes stronger than any scar. That choice is the doorway to healing, to freedom, and to the life you deserve. Boundaries are often misunderstood, but they are the foundation of emotional healing. For many people, the idea of setting boundaries feels uncomfortable, even selfish. We fear that if we draw the line, others will think less of us or pull away. But the truth is, boundaries are not about shutting people out. They are about protecting the space where you can grow, recover, and feel safe. Without boundaries, you give away pieces of yourself until nothing is left. Healing begins when you recognize that saying no to what harms you is actually saying yes to your peace. Think about the times when you felt drained after an interaction. Maybe it was a conversation with a friend who only calls when they need something. Maybe it was the guilt you felt for saying no to a family request, so you ended up sacrificing your own needs just to keep them happy. Those are moments where your lack of boundaries kept you trapped. Every time you silence your own voice to avoid disappointing someone else, you're sending yourself a message. You don't matter. That message is corrosive. Over time, it chips away at your confidence, your sense of worth, and your ability to trust yourself. Boundaries, on the other hand, send the opposite message. They say, I matter enough to protect my energy. They say, my time has value. They say, if you want to be part of my life, it must be built on respect. This is not cruelty. It is clarity. And clarity creates freedom. When you begin to honor your boundaries, you start to notice a shift. You have more energy. You feel lighter. You start to see that the relationships which remain are healthier, more balanced, and more respectful because they're built on truth, not resentment. One of the hardest parts about boundaries is the guilt that comes with them. We're conditioned to believe that being good means always being available, always saying yes, always showing up no matter the cost to ourselves. But what if I told you that constantly giving until you're empty isn't kindness, it's neglect. Neglect of yourself. And neglecting yourself is the fastest way to delay your healing. Healing cannot happen in an environment where you feel violated, taken advantage of, or constantly disrespected. You cannot stitch up your wounds while someone keeps tearing them open. Boundaries are the guardrails that protect your healing process. Consider this. If someone you love were hurt and needed time to recover, you would protect them fiercely. You wouldn't let others disturb their rest or add more pain to their situation. Why should you treat yourself any differently? When you're in a season of healing, you must become your own protector. That might mean saying no to events you're not ready for, limiting your time with people who trigger your pain, or even walking away from relationships that consistently harm you. It might mean taking more time alone than others understand, and that's okay. Boundaries are not about making others comfortable. They're about keeping you whole. Here's the reality. People who benefit from your lack of boundaries will resist when you finally enforce them. They may call you selfish, cold, or difficult, but that resistance is proof of why the boundary is necessary. Anyone who genuinely respects you will eventually adjust, and those who don't will reveal themselves. Healing requires courage to withstand that discomfort. Every time you hold firm, you reinforce to yourself, I am worthy of respect. That repetition builds strength in you. It reprograms your mind to believe in your own value again. Boundaries also create space for joy. Without them, your life gets filled with obligations that drain you. With them, you finally have room for the things that lift you, inspire you, and nurture your growth. Suddenly you have time for rest, for hobbies, for dreams you put on hold. Healing is not just about removing pain. It's about creating a life where joy and peace can thrive. And that begins when you clear out what no longer serves you through the power of boundaries. Remember, boundaries are not about building walls. They are about opening the right doors. They are not about control. They are about choice. And the most important choice you can make is to choose yourself. Choosing yourself means refusing to betray your heart, your energy, and your needs for the comfort of others. It means protecting your healing journey so that one day you can step forward stronger, freer, and fully alive. The truth is simple. You cannot heal in the same environment that broke you. If you want to move forward, you must protect yourself from the patterns, the people, and the habits that kept you stuck. Boundaries are your shield, and every time you honor them, you're not pushing people away, you're pulling yourself back to wholeness. And that is where real healing begins. Self-compassion is often the missing piece in the journey of healing. So many people go through life with an inner critic that is harsher than any enemy they've ever faced in the outside world. You tell yourself things you would never dare say to someone you love. You replay your mistakes over and over, calling yourself weak, stupid, or unworthy. And what you don't realize is that every word you use against yourself cuts deeper than anything anyone else could ever say. Healing cannot take root in a mind that constantly attacks itself. That's why the shift from self-criticism to self-compassion is not just important, it is essential. Self-criticism often comes disguised as discipline. You convince yourself that being hard on yourself will push you to do better, that if you shame yourself enough, you'll change. But the truth is, self-criticism doesn't make you stronger. It makes you shrink. It paralyzes you in fear of failing again. It makes you avoid risks, avoid opportunities, and even avoid relationships because deep down you're scared that your flaws will show and confirm the cruel words you've already told yourself. Instead of driving you forward, self-criticism chains you to the past. Self-compassion, on the other hand, is not about making excuses for your mistakes or ignoring your flaws. It's about choosing to treat yourself with the same patience, grace, and understanding that you would give to someone you love who is hurting. Think of it this way. If a close friend came to you in tears, telling you they made a mistake, would you tell them they are worthless? Would you tear them down, call them names, and magnify their failures? Of course not. You would comfort them, remind them that they are human, that one mistake does not define them, and that tomorrow is another chance to try again. So why do you refuse to extend that same compassion to yourself? Healing accelerates when you start replacing judgment with kindness. When the old thoughts creep in, I'll never be enough, I'm broken, I can't do this, catch yourself and reframe them. Say, I am learning, I am growing, I am trying. That small shift creates space in your mind for hope instead of despair. It turns setbacks into lessons instead of life sentences. And when you give yourself permission to be human, you stop punishing yourself for things you cannot change and start focusing on what you can improve. Self-compassion also strengthens resilience. When you know you will not destroy yourself for failing, you become more willing to take risks. You try new things, speak up, and step forward because you know that even if you stumble, you won't be torn apart by your own voice. That safety net of kindness becomes the foundation for growth. You learn to trust yourself again because you no longer fear your own judgment. Another reason self-compassion is so powerful is because it rewires your relationship with pain. Life will always bring challenges, disappointments, and losses. You cannot control that, but you can control how you respond to yourself in those moments. When you approach yourself with empathy instead of criticism, the pain doesn't multiply. You can sit with it, understand it, and begin to move through it instead of drowning in it. Compassion softens the edges of suffering and gives you strength to keep going. It's also important to remember that healing takes time. Self-compassion reminds you that progress is not linear and that it's okay to have days where you don't feel strong. Criticism says, you should be over this by now. Compassion says, it's okay, keep going. You're healing at your own pace. That difference is everything. Healing is not a race, and there is no deadline for becoming whole. By choosing compassion, you give yourself the patience necessary to allow real transformation to happen. If you've lived most of your life listening to that critical voice, choosing compassion might feel uncomfortable at first. You may even feel guilty, like you don't deserve kindness. That's the conditioning of years of self-neglect speaking. But here's the truth. You are worthy of love, especially your own. You cannot build a fulfilling life while treating yourself as an enemy. You must become your own ally. And that begins the moment you replace cruelty with care. So the next time you catch yourself in self-criticism, stop, take a breath, ask yourself, would I speak to someone I love this way? And if the answer is no, then change the words. Replace I'm a failure with I'm still learning. Replace I'll never heal with I am healing step by step. These small shifts matter more than you think because every time you choose compassion over criticism, you are telling yourself, I am worth saving. I am worth healing. I am worth choosing. And that is where true healing begins. Not in perfection, not in doing everything right, but in finally choosing to stand by yourself even on the days you fall. Self-compassion is not weakness. It's the deepest form of strength because it allows you to rise again and again, no matter how many times life tries to break you. The way we live every day shapes how we heal, how we grow, and how we see ourselves. It's easy to think that healing requires some massive breakthrough, a huge shift, or a single powerful moment that changes everything. But the truth is, healing is rarely about big moments. It's about the quiet, consistent choices you make each day. It's about the habits you build that remind you that you are worth the effort, worth the care, and worth the love you so freely give to everyone else. When you've been hurt, whether by others or by the weight of your own mistakes, there's a tendency to freeze. You feel paralyzed, as if life is on hold until the pain disappears. But healing doesn't work that way. You cannot wait until you feel whole to start moving. You become whole by choosing to move step by step. And those steps are built on habits, simple ones that may not seem like much at first, but when repeated, they rebuild your confidence, your strength, and your sense of self. Think about how you treat yourself on an average day. Do you wake up and immediately criticize yourself for being tired, for not doing enough, for not looking a certain way? Or do you wake up and acknowledge that you're human, that your body and mind need care? The smallest shift, drinking water before reaching for your phone, writing down one thing you're grateful for, choosing movement over stagnation. These aren't just routines, they're declarations. They are you telling yourself, I matter. That's what habits really are. They're physical evidence that you value yourself. Healing thrives in consistency. A single day of self-care won't undo years of neglect. But a consistent practice of showing up for yourself creates trust. And that's often what's broken when you're hurting. You stop trusting yourself. You start doubting your decisions, your worth, your ability to bounce back. Daily habits rebuild that trust because every time you follow through, you prove to yourself that you are reliable, that you won't abandon yourself again. Something as small as a morning routine, a nightly reflection, or a few minutes of stillness can anchor you when everything else feels uncertain. It's also important to understand that habits aren't only about physical actions. They're about the way you speak to yourself, the thoughts you allow to take root. If your habit is to constantly replay your failures, compare yourself to others, or expect the worst, your healing will feel impossible. But if you begin building the habit of self-compassion, if you pause to reframe your thoughts when you catch yourself spiraling, you're training your mind to support you instead of sabotage you. That doesn't happen overnight, but like any muscle, your mindset grows stronger with repetition. Another thing about daily habits is that they create structure, and structure brings safety. When you're in pain, life feels chaotic, overwhelming, and unpredictable. Creating even the simplest structure, a time to walk, a time to breathe, a time to write down what you're feeling, helps calm the storm. You may not be able to control everything around you, but you can control how you show up for yourself. That control is empowering. It reminds you that while you cannot rewrite your past, you can choose how you shape your present and future. Some days you will resist these habits. You'll feel tired, unmotivated, maybe even hopeless. That's normal. Healing isn't about being perfect. It's about persistence. On those days, doing the bare minimum still counts because it reinforces that you're not giving up on yourself. You don't need to run marathons. Write pages in a journal or meditate for an hour. Sometimes it's simply about making your bed, taking a deep breath, or choosing not to engage with someone who drains you. Those are victories too. The beauty of daily habits is that they accumulate. At first they seem small, almost insignificant, but over time they change your identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who is broken and start seeing yourself as someone who takes responsibility for their healing. Each habit becomes a vote for the kind of person you're becoming, a person who values themselves, protects their peace, and believes they are worthy of a good life. Healing doesn't demand perfection, it demands participation. It demands that you show up for yourself every day in ways that are tangible, consistent, and real. You may not notice the change immediately, but one day you'll look back and realize that the small daily habits you committed to have carried you from surviving to thriving. That's the power of choosing yourself in the details of your everyday life. When you've been hurt, rejected, or overlooked, it's easy to tie your worth to the way people treat you. You start to believe that if someone values you, then you're valuable. If they ignore you, then you don't matter. If they love you, then you're lovable. And if they leave, then you must not be enough. That cycle is exhausting, and it leaves you feeling like your worth is always in someone else's hands. But the truth is, healing only begins when you cut that tie and stop basing your value on external validation. Think about how many times you've waited for approval before taking a step forward. Maybe you wanted to chase a dream but held back until someone said, "I believe in you." Maybe you wanted to set a boundary but second-guessed yourself because you worried how others would see you. Or maybe you stayed in unhealthy situations because the thought of losing someone's validation scared you more than losing yourself. That is what happens when you build your identity around what others think. You hand them the keys to your happiness, and you live in a cage of constant performance, hoping for applause. The problem with external validation is that it's unstable. One day people can praise you, and the next day they can criticize you. If your sense of self-worth swings with their opinions, you'll always be chasing approval instead of living freely. No one else should be the judge of your value because no one else truly knows the battles you've fought, the growth you've achieved, or the strength you've built in silence. Depending on others for validation is like building your foundation on sand. It may stand for a while, but it will always collapse under pressure. When you stop chasing validation, something powerful happens. You begin to validate yourself. You learn to say, "I am enough as I am. I don't need someone else to tell me that in order to believe it." You start realizing that the applause, the compliments, and even the acceptance you were chasing don't define you. They may feel good, but they're not the core of your worth. What defines you is the commitment you make to yourself every single day. The quiet moments where you choose to honor your needs, your dreams, and your truth. This shift doesn't happen overnight. At first, you'll feel uncomfortable. You may even feel guilty for not constantly seeking approval. But as you practice, you'll notice something. You feel lighter. You're no longer trapped in the exhausting cycle of wondering if people like you, wondering if you've done enough to be accepted, or wondering if you measure up. You'll discover a new kind of peace, one that comes from knowing you are secure in yourself, regardless of who notices or who doesn't. Think about the freedom that comes from no longer being controlled by someone else's opinion. You can pursue your passions without worrying if they're good enough. You can walk away from relationships that drain you because you're no longer afraid of being alone. You can make choices that align with your values because you're not desperate for approval. That's what healing looks like. It's reclaiming your own voice after years of silencing it for others. There will be people who don't understand your journey. They might call you selfish for putting yourself first, or distant because you no longer bend to please them. But their reaction is not a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of how your growth disrupts the comfort they once had in controlling or defining you. And that's okay. Not everyone will celebrate your healing, but that doesn't make it any less valuable. The most important relationship you'll ever have is the one you have with yourself. Every time you choose to validate yourself, instead of waiting for someone else to do it, you strengthen that relationship. You start to trust yourself more. You start to believe in your own voice more. And when that relationship becomes unshakable, you no longer need the world to tell you that you matter. You already know it. Healing is not about convincing others of your worth. It's about convincing yourself, and then living in a way that reflects that belief. So stop waiting for someone to clap for you, stop waiting for recognition, and stop measuring your value against opinions that change like the wind. Your worth is permanent. It was never meant to be negotiated. The moment you accept that truth is the moment your healing takes root and grows into strength, confidence, and peace. Healing is not a quick fix. It's a journey that unfolds over time. One of the greatest mistakes people make is believing that once they decide to heal, the process should be instant, smooth, or predictable. But healing does not obey our schedules or our desire for speed. It's a process that asks for patience, persistence, and a deep commitment to yourself. Choosing yourself is the starting point, but staying consistent in that choice every single day is what creates real transformation. When you first begin, it's easy to feel motivated. You make promises to yourself. You feel the spark of change. And for a while, it seems like progress is happening quickly. But then life happens. Old triggers return. People test your boundaries. You stumble into familiar patterns. And in those moments, you may feel discouraged, as if you've made no progress at all. This is where patience becomes your most powerful ally. Healing is not measured by how many times you fall back. It's measured by your ability to stand up again and keep moving forward. Many people quit on themselves because they confuse setbacks with failure. But the truth is, setbacks are part of the process. Imagine learning to walk. A child doesn't stand up and run perfectly the first time. They wobble, they fall, they cry, and they try again. And no one sees those falls as failures. They're part of learning. Your healing works the same way. Every stumble, every difficult day, every tear shed is not wasted. It's building resilience. It's teaching you something. It's preparing you for the stronger version of yourself that is emerging. Patience also means learning to honor your timing. You cannot rush the lessons your pain is here to teach you. There will be seasons where it feels like nothing is changing, but in reality, deep work is happening beneath the surface. Just like a seed planted in the ground doesn't sprout overnight, your healing may not always show visible results right away. But that doesn't mean progress isn't happening. Every time you choose rest over burnout, truth over silence, or courage over fear, you are planting seeds of healing that will grow in their time. Another reason patience is so vital is because healing requires rewiring old beliefs and habits that have been built over years, sometimes decades. You cannot expect a lifetime of self-neglect to disappear after one choice. You have to show up for yourself again and again until choosing yourself becomes second nature. This repetition, though slow, builds strength. Just like muscles grow through consistent exercise, your self-worth grows through consistent action. Patience is what allows you to trust the process when you can't yet see the results. Persistence plays an equal role. Healing asks you to keep going even when it's hard, even when it feels like progress is invisible, and even when others don't understand your journey. There will be moments when the old you whispers louder than the new you. Moments when you'll feel tempted to go back to toxic relationships, destructive habits, or familiar patterns because they feel comfortable. Persistence means reminding yourself in those moments why you began. It's holding on to the vision of the life you're creating, even when the evidence hasn't fully shown up yet. Patience and persistence are not glamorous. They don't give you instant gratification, but they are what transform temporary breakthroughs into lasting change. Anyone can make a decision in one powerful moment, but only those who patiently persist can turn that decision into a new reality. Healing is not about speed, it's about staying the course. You must also remember that comparison is the enemy of patience. Looking at someone else's journey and thinking, why am I not there yet, will only rob you of peace. Healing doesn't follow a universal timeline, it follows yours. Your wounds, your experiences, your lessons are unique to you. The pace of your healing cannot and should not be measured against anyone else's. The more you compare, the more frustrated you'll feel. The more you honor your pace, the freer you'll become. There will be days when you feel like you've made huge progress and days when you feel like you're back at the beginning. That's normal. Progress is rarely a straight line. It's more like waves, some days high, some days low, but